The revelation that someone inside the courthouse was manipulating Dr. Hayes' schedule changed everything about Marcus's daily routine. Instead of watching for external threats, he now had to consider that any colleague, any regular visitor, or any court employee could be the person Sarah was looking for. The problem, Sarah explained during another coffee shop meeting, is that we don't know what the end game is. Someone went to a lot of trouble to get Dr. Hayes into specific locations at specific times, but we still don't understand why. Marcus had been thinking about this constantly since their last conversation. What if they weren't trying to use Dr. Hayes for something? What if they were trying to get him out of the way? Sarah looked up sharply from her coffee. What do you mean? Dr. Hayes is scheduled to testify in some big cases, right? What if someone wanted to discredit him or make him unavailable for those testimonies? By getting him arrested for being in the courthouse under false pretenses. Exactly. If federal agents arrested him for suspicious behavior, it would raise questions about his reliability as a witness. Even if the charges didn't stick, the defense attorneys could use the incident to challenge his credibility. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, clearly considering this possibility. That would require someone with detailed knowledge of upcoming trial schedules and testimony calendars, and access to contact information for law offices and expert witnesses, which narrows it down to court administrators, judges' staff, or attorneys with high-level access. Marcus felt a chill as he realized the implications. Someone who could do a lot more damage than just discrediting one witness. Over the next week, Sarah worked with federal investigators to analyze courthouse personnel records, communication logs, and access patterns. Meanwhile, Marcus continued his normal duties while paying careful attention to administrative staff and regular courthouse visitors. The break in the case came from an unexpected source. On Friday morning, Marcus was reviewing security footage from the previous week when he noticed something odd. The video showed Dr. Hayes arriving for his first suspicious appointment, but in the background, barely visible, was someone else Marcus recognized, Janet Morrison, a senior clerk in the court administration office. Janet had been at the courthouse longer than Marcus, nearly 12 years. She was in her early 50s, efficient and professional, with access to scheduling systems for multiple courtrooms. Marcus had always liked her. She was friendly but not chatty, helpful with administrative questions, and seemed to genuinely care about making the courthouse run smoothly. But in the security footage, Janet was positioning herself near the elevator bank at exactly the time Dr. Hayes arrived, despite having no obvious reason to be in the lobby. She appeared to be watching him carefully, and when he headed toward the elevators, she followed at a discreet distance. Marcus immediately called Sarah with this information. Janet Morrison, Sarah repeated, making notes. What's her normal routine? She usually arrives around 7:30 a.m., works primarily on the 9th floor in court administration, and leaves around 4:30 p.m. She has access to scheduling systems for most of the courtrooms and works with judges' clerks on administrative matters. Would she have access to contact information for expert witnesses and law offices? Marcus thought about this carefully. Yes, definitely. Her office coordinates with outside attorneys and expert witnesses all the time. She would have phone numbers, email addresses, case schedules, everything someone would need to make those calls to Dr. Hayes. Can you watch her today without being obvious about it? I can try, but I don't want to create suspicion if she's innocent. Understood. Just normal observation. Marcus spent that Friday paying closer attention to Janet's movements without changing his own routine. She arrived at her usual time, worked at her desk on the 9th floor, attended a staff meeting at 11 a.m., and had lunch in the courthouse cafeteria. Everything appeared completely normal. But at 3:20 p.m., Janet did something unusual. She left her office and took the elevator down to the basement level, which housed maintenance areas and record storage. Marcus only noticed because he was checking the elevator monitoring system as part of his normal security routine. Janet had no obvious business in the basement. Her work was administrative, not maintenance-related, and record storage was typically accessed by appointment through a different department. Marcus waited 20 minutes, then found an excuse to check the basement level himself. He told his supervisor he was investigating a report of a malfunctioning emergency alarm, a routine matter that wouldn't attract attention. The basement was quiet and dimly lit. Marcus found Janet in the record storage area, standing in front of a computer terminal that was used for accessing archived case files. She was typing rapidly, clearly focused on whatever she was researching. More importantly, she had a cell phone pressed to her ear. Marcus stayed out of sight, close enough to observe, but far enough away to avoid detection. Janet's conversation was too quiet for him to hear the words, but her body language suggested she was reporting information to someone. She would read something from the computer screen, relay it over the phone, then type another query. After about 10 minutes, Janet ended the phone call, logged off the computer, and headed back toward the elevators. Marcus waited until she was gone, then checked the computer terminal to see what files she had been accessing. The system showed that Janet had been reviewing upcoming trial schedules, witness lists, and testimony calendars for federal cases involving organized crime prosecutions. Specifically, she had accessed files related to trials where Dr. Hayes was scheduled to testify as an expert witness. Marcus immediately called Sarah with this information. She was checking Dr. Hayes's upcoming testimony schedule and reporting it to someone over the phone, he explained. From the basement records area, away from her normal workspace. Exactly. And she had no legitimate reason to be down there. Marcus, I need you to do something. But it's going to require you to trust me completely. What kind of something? I want you to approach Janet directly. Tell her you saw her in the basement, and ask if she needs help with anything. Make it seem casual, but pay attention to how she reacts. Marcus felt his stomach drop. You want me to confront a potential federal criminal? I want you to have a normal conversation with a colleague. If she's innocent, she'll have a reasonable explanation for being in the records area. If she's not innocent, her reaction will tell us a lot. Monday morning, Marcus found an opportunity to speak with Janet during the mid-morning coffee break. She was in the courthouse cafeteria, sitting alone at a small table near the window, reading a paperback novel while she ate a muffin. Mind if I join you? Marcus asked, carrying his coffee cup. Of course not. Janet replied with her usual friendly smile. Quiet morning so far. Pretty typical for Monday. Hey, I thought I saw you in the basement on Friday afternoon. Everything okay down there? Janet's reaction was immediate and telling. Her smile faltered for just a moment, and she set down her coffee cup with slightly more force than necessary. Basement? I don't think so. I was in meetings most of Friday afternoon. Marcus kept his tone casual and friendly. Maybe I was mistaken. Someone was in the records area, and I thought it looked like you. Definitely not me, Janet said firmly. I rarely have reason to go down there. But her eyes weren't meeting his, and she was fidgeting with her book in a way that seemed nervous rather than casual. No problem, Marcus said easily. Like I said, probably mistaken identity. Janet nodded and turned back to her book, but Marcus could see she was no longer actually reading. Her eyes weren't moving across the page, and she seemed to be thinking about something else entirely. Marcus finished his coffee and returned to his security station, but he noticed that Janet left the cafeteria immediately after he did, abandoning her half-eaten muffin and unfinished coffee. At lunchtime, Marcus called Sarah to report the conversation. She lied, Sarah said immediately after hearing Marcus's account, and not very convincingly. So what happens now? Now we set a trap. Sarah's plan was elegant in its simplicity. Federal investigators would create a fake high-profile case with fabricated witness information and testimony schedules. Then, make sure Janet had access to the details through her normal administrative channels. If she was passing information to outside parties, she would likely try to access and report this new case information. We'll monitor all her communications and computer access, Sarah explained. If she takes the bait, we'll know for certain that she's our source. The fake case file was introduced into the courthouse system on Tuesday morning. It involved a fictional organized crime prosecution with multiple expert witnesses, including several forensic psychiatrists similar to Dr. Hayes. The testimony schedules were designed to be particularly sensitive. Key witnesses testifying about crucial evidence that could make or break the prosecution's case. Janet accessed the fake file Wednesday afternoon. Marcus learned about this during an emergency meeting with Sarah in the courthouse parking garage, away from any potential surveillance. She accessed the file at 2:45 p.m. and spent 18 minutes reviewing the witness schedules and Testimony details, Sarah reported. At 3:15 p.m., she made a phone call to a number we've been monitoring. The conversation lasted 12 minutes. So she's definitely passing information. Without question. And Marcus, the phone number she called belongs to Anthony Russo, who's currently under federal investigation for racketeering and conspiracy charges. Marcus felt everything click into place. She's feeding information about federal cases to organized crime defendants. Testimony schedules, witness identities, evidence details, everything a defense team would need to intimidate witnesses or prepare counter-strategies. How long has this been going on? We're still analyzing her access logs, but it looks like at least 6 months, possibly longer. Marcus thought about all the cases that had passed through the courthouse in recent months, all the witnesses who had testified, all the verdicts that had seemed surprisingly favorable to defendants despite strong prosecution cases. How many cases might have been compromised? Sarah's expression was grim. Potentially dozens. Janet Morrison was arrested Thursday morning as she arrived for work. Marcus watched from his security station as federal agents approached her in the courthouse lobby, showed their badges, and quietly escorted her to a waiting car. She didn't resist or cause a scene, but Marcus could see the shock and fear on her face as she realized her activities had been discovered. The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of Janet's activities. For nearly 8 months, she had been systematically accessing confidential case information and passing it to Anthony Russo's organization. In return, she had received monthly payments of $5,000, deposited into an account under her maiden name. The information she provided had been used to intimidate witnesses, prepare defense strategies, and, in some cases, to threaten or bribe jury members. Several federal prosecutions had been compromised, resulting in acquittals or reduced sentences for serious criminals. The attempted manipulation of Dr. Hayes had been part of a larger plan to discredit key prosecution witnesses in an upcoming racketeering trial. By creating suspicious circumstances around Dr. Hayes's courthouse visits, Janet and her collaborators had hoped to raise questions about his reliability and potentially get him removed from the witness list entirely. The case made national news, not just because of the security breach, but because of how it was solved. The partnership between a courthouse security guard and a federal agent became the focus of numerous articles about the importance of vigilant security personnel and interagency cooperation. Marcus found himself somewhat uncomfortable with the media attention, but he was proud of the role he had played in protecting the integrity of the federal court system. Sarah, whose real name turned out to be Agent Sarah Chun of the FBI's Public Corruption Unit, commended him officially for his observational skills and professionalism. "You probably prevented several more cases from being compromised," she told him during their final official meeting. "And you helped us understand how federal courthouse security can be strengthened against internal threats." 6 months later, Janet Morrison pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges and was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison. Anthony Russo and 3 associates were convicted on racketeering charges based partly on evidence gathered during the investigation of Janet's activities. Marcus returned to his normal routine at the courthouse, but he never stopped paying attention to details that might seem insignificant to others. The experience had taught him that security threats could come from anywhere, even from colleagues who seemed completely trustworthy. He kept the secure phone Sarah had given him, though it was never used again. But sometimes, walking through the courthouse lobby and watching the daily flow of attorneys, defendants, and court personnel, Marcus remembered that maintaining security was more than just checking IDs and operating metal detectors. Real security meant understanding that anyone could be a threat, that routine could hide suspicious activity, and that the most important qualities for a security professional were careful observation and the willingness to ask questions when something didn't feel right. The case became required reading at federal law enforcement training academies as an example of how security breaches could be identified and stopped through cooperation between different types of personnel. Marcus occasionally received invitations to speak at training seminars, sharing his insights about recognizing unusual patterns and the importance of trusting professional instincts. But, mostly, he continued doing the job he had always done, keeping people safe, maintaining order, and paying attention to the details that others might miss. The difference was that now he understood just how important that attention could be, and how a simple conversation with the right person at the right time could prevent serious damage to the federal justice system. The courthouse still saw all kinds of people every day. Lawyers in expensive suits, families supporting loved ones, witnesses facing difficult questions. Marcus still treated them all with the same respect and quiet professionalism. But he also watched more carefully, listened more attentively, and trusted his instincts when something seemed out of place. Because sometimes the most ordinary-seeming situations could hide the most extraordinary threats, and sometimes a security guard's careful observations could make the difference between justice and corruption. The first week of Marcus's unofficial partnership with Sarah Chun passed quietly. He paid closer attention to the daily rhythms of the courthouse, noting arrival times, regular visitors, and any deviations from normal patterns. Sarah had given him a secure phone that looked exactly like his personal device, with one number programmed into it. Only use this for emergencies, she had explained during a brief meeting in the courthouse cafeteria. If you see something that doesn't feel right, call immediately. Don't try to investigate on your own. Marcus kept the phone in his uniform pocket, checking it occasionally to make sure it was charged and working. He felt slightly foolish, like a character in a movie rather than a middle-aged security guard going about his normal duties. That changed on Thursday morning. Marcus was reviewing the daily visitor log when he noticed something odd. Dr. William Hayes, a forensic psychiatrist who occasionally testified in criminal cases, was scheduled to meet with 3 different attorneys in 3 different courtrooms over the next 2 weeks. This wasn't unusual by itself. Expert witnesses often had busy schedules, but the timing struck Marcus as strange. All 3 meetings were scheduled for late afternoon, when the courthouse was less busy. All 3 were in courtrooms on the upper floors, away from the main public areas. And, according to the visitor log, Dr. Hayes had requested building access for preliminary case consultation on days when no trials were scheduled in those courtrooms. Marcus made a note of the information and continued his normal duties, but the pattern bothered him. During his lunch break, he looked up Dr. Hayes online. The man had impressive credentials, medical degree from Johns Hopkins, specialty training in forensic psychiatry, extensive experience testifying in federal cases. His photo showed a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Everything about Dr. Hayes appeared legitimate, but the scheduling pattern still felt wrong to Marcus. He decided to pay attention when the doctor arrived for his first appointment on Friday afternoon. Dr. Hayes arrived at 3:15 p.m., dressed in an expensive gray suit and carrying a leather briefcase. He was exactly as professional and distinguished as his photo suggested, greeting Marcus politely and moving efficiently through the security checkpoint. His identification was in order, his appointment confirmed, and his demeanor completely appropriate. Marcus watched him head toward the elevators and noticed that Dr. Hayes seemed to know his way around the building very well for someone whose visits were supposedly infrequent. He walked directly to the correct elevator bank without checking the directory, pressed the button for the 14th floor without hesitation, and moved with the confidence of someone familiar with the courthouse layout. At 4:30 p.m., Marcus called the law office that had scheduled the meeting to confirm that Dr. Hayes had arrived as expected. Dr. Hayes? The receptionist sounded confused. We don't have any appointment with Dr. Hayes today. Are you sure you have the right office? Marcus double-checked the visitor log. The appointment was definitely listed for that office, in courtroom 14B. Could you check with the attorney? Maybe it was scheduled directly. Hold on a minute. After a brief wait, the receptionist returned. I checked with Mr. Rodriguez, and he says he's never heard of Dr. Hayes. He doesn't have any meetings scheduled for today at all. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. Thank you for checking. He immediately called the secure phone number Sarah had given him. I need you to check on something, he said when she answered. Dr. William Hayes, supposed to be a forensic psychiatrist. He's in the building right now with what appears to be fake appointments. Where is he now? 14th floor, courtroom 14B area. But the law office that supposedly scheduled the meeting says they've never heard of him. Don't approach him. I'm on my way. Can you monitor the exits without being obvious about it? Yes. But, Sarah, there are 2 more appointments scheduled for him next week. Same pattern, late afternoon, upper floors, courtrooms with no scheduled trials. There was a moment of silence on the line. We've been looking for someone exactly like that. Stay where you are and keep watching. Marcus spent the next 20 minutes in a state of controlled alertness. He maintained his normal position at the security desk, checking IDs and operating the metal detectors, but kept one eye on the elevator bank and the main exits. His hands felt slightly shaky, and he had to consciously control his breathing. At 4:50 p.m., Dr. Hayes reappeared at the elevators. He looked exactly as calm and professional as when he had arrived, showing no signs of concern or hurry. He walked through the lobby at a normal pace, nodded politely to Marcus as he passed the security desk, and exited through the main doors onto Federal Plaza. Marcus watched through the lobby windows as Dr. Hayes walked north toward the subway station, briefcase in hand, moving with the same confident stride he had shown inside the building. Sarah arrived 10 minutes later, dressed in her usual professional attire, but moving with visible urgency. She badged through the employee entrance and approached Marcus's station directly. "Show me the visitor log," she said quietly. Marcus pulled up the electronic records on his computer screen, pointing to Dr. Hayes's entry and the scheduled appointments. Sarah studied the information carefully, taking notes in a small notebook. "You said he seemed familiar with the building layout?" "Very familiar. Went straight to the right elevator, knew which floor, didn't hesitate or check any signs." "And the law office confirmed they had no appointment with him?" "Never heard of him." Sarah was quiet for a moment, apparently thinking through the implications. "Marcus, I need you to do something for me, but it has to be very careful and very unofficial." "What kind of something?" "Next week, when Dr. Hayes comes back for his other appointments, I want you to follow the same procedure. Call the offices that supposedly scheduled the meetings. But do it before he arrives, if possible." Marcus nodded. "And if they also say they don't know him? Then we'll be ready for him." Over the weekend, Marcus found himself researching courthouse security procedures, trying to understand what someone with unauthorized access might be able to accomplish. The federal courthouse housed multiple courtrooms, judges' chambers, jury deliberation rooms, holding cells for defendants, and extensive administrative offices. It also connected to secure databases containing sensitive case information and had communication links to other federal facilities. Someone with expert knowledge of building systems and enough time to study the layout could potentially access areas they shouldn't be in, copy sensitive information, or even plant surveillance devices. Monday morning, Marcus called the law office scheduled for Dr. Hayes's Tuesday afternoon appointment. "Dr. Hayes?" "No, we definitely don't have any meeting scheduled with anyone by that name," the legal assistant confirmed. "And Attorney Williams doesn't have any appointments at all on Tuesday afternoon. She's in trial all week in another courthouse." Marcus immediately called Sarah with the information. "Same pattern," he reported. "Fake appointment, attorney who's supposed to be elsewhere." "Perfect. This time, we're going to be waiting for him." Tuesday afternoon, Marcus felt like he was part of an elaborate stage production. Everything appeared normal in the courthouse lobby. Visitors checking in, attorneys hurrying to meetings, Marcus at his usual position running security. But he knew Sarah was somewhere in the building, probably with backup agents, preparing to intercept Dr. Hayes. At 3:10 p.m., 5 minutes before his scheduled appointment, Dr. Hayes entered the lobby. He looked exactly the same as the previous week, professional, confident, and completely legitimate. He approached Marcus's station with a polite smile. "Good afternoon. Dr. William Hayes to see Attorney Williams in courtroom 12A. Marcus checked his identification and made the required entries in the visitor log, but this time he paid closer attention to the details. The ID appeared genuine, but something about Dr. Hayes's demeanor seemed different. He was still polite and professional, but there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there the previous week. 12th floor, courtroom 12A, Marcus said, handing back the identification. Dr. Hayes headed toward the elevators, and Marcus activated the discreet signal Sarah had given him, adjusting his position at the security desk in a way that would be invisible to casual observers, but would alert the federal agents positioned throughout the building. At 3:45 p.m., Marcus heard Sarah's voice over the courthouse internal radio system, using the agreed-upon code phrase. Security to courtroom 12A, please. Minor administrative issue. Marcus knew this meant Dr. Hayes had been confronted and was in federal custody. What he didn't expect was what happened next. At 4:15 p.m., as Marcus was finishing the paperwork for the incident and preparing to go home, Sarah approached his security station. But instead of the satisfied expression he expected, she looked troubled and slightly confused. "We need to talk," she said quietly. "But not here. Same coffee shop, 1 hour." An hour later, sitting across from Sarah in the small neighborhood cafe, Marcus learned something that changed everything he thought he understood about the situation. Dr. Hayes is exactly who he claimed to be. Sarah began without preamble. Licensed psychiatrist, extensive experience with federal cases, completely legitimate credentials. Marcus stared at her. But the fake appointments. Not fake. Rescheduled. All 3 law offices confirmed that they had requested consultations with Dr. Hayes. But the meetings had been moved to different dates and different locations due to scheduling conflicts. Then, why was he in the building? Sarah leaned forward, lowering her voice. "That's what we need to figure out." According to Dr. Hayes, he received calls from each law office last week, confirming his original appointment times and locations. He came to the courthouse because he thought the meetings were still scheduled. Marcus felt confused and slightly sick to his stomach. So someone was impersonating the law offices? It looks that way. Someone wanted Dr. Hayes in that building, on those specific days, at those specific times. But why? We don't know yet. But, Marcus, here's the part that's really concerning. Dr. Hayes says the phone calls he received came from someone who knew details about his cases that shouldn't have been public information. Marcus sat back in his chair, trying to process this new information. Someone with access to confidential legal files. Someone with access to very sensitive confidential legal files. Someone who works in the courthouse. Sarah nodded slowly. "That's what we think. And, whoever it is, they're still out there." Marcus Thompson had been working security at the federal courthouse in downtown Chicago for 8 years. Every morning at 6:30 a.m., he would arrive at the imposing granite building, badge his way through the employee entrance, and begin his routine checks. The metal detectors, the X-ray machines, the panic buttons, everything had to be perfect before the first visitors arrived at 8 a.m. At 52 years old, Marcus was the kind of man people trusted immediately. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, graying hair that he kept neatly trimmed, and a way of speaking that made even nervous defendants feel a little more at ease. His uniform was always pressed, his badge always polished, and his smile always genuine. The courthouse saw all kinds of people. Lawyers in expensive suits rushing to hearings, families supporting loved ones through difficult trials, witnesses clutching subpoenas with shaking hands. Marcus treated them all the same, with respect and quiet professionalism. He knew many of the regular attorneys by name, remembered which judges preferred their coffee black, and could spot trouble from across the lobby. On a typical Tuesday morning in March, everything seemed normal. The spring weather had brought more foot traffic than usual, and Marcus was busy helping an elderly woman navigate the metal detector when he noticed her. A woman in her 30s, professionally dressed in a navy blazer and gray slacks, stood near the information desk looking slightly lost. She had shoulder-length brown hair and carried a leather briefcase that looked expensive but well-used. "Can I help you find something?" Marcus asked after ensuring the elderly woman was safely through security. The woman turned, and Marcus noticed she had striking green eyes and a firm handshake. "I'm looking for courtroom 14B. I have a meeting with Judge Patterson's clerk. 14th floor. Take the elevator bank on your right. Turn left when you get off, and it's the 3rd door down." Marcus pointed toward the elevators with the practiced ease of someone who gave directions dozens of times each day. "Thank you so much," she said, flashing a quick smile before heading toward the elevators. Marcus thought nothing more of the interaction until he saw her again the next day. And the day after that. By Thursday, he was curious. It was unusual for someone to have business in the same courtroom 4 days running, especially someone who wasn't obviously an attorney or court employee. On Friday morning, she approached his security station directly. "Good morning, Marcus," she said, reading his name tag. "I wanted to thank you for your help this week. I'm Sarah Chun, by the way." Marcus was surprised she remembered his name. even more surprised that she seemed to want to chat. "No problem at all, Miss Chun. Big case keeping you here all week." Sarah's expression became slightly guarded. "Something like that. Research project, actually. I work for the government, Federal Audit Division. We're reviewing courthouse security procedures nationwide." The explanation made sense, but something in her tone made Marcus pay attention. He had developed good instincts about people over his years in security, and something felt slightly off. Not dangerous, just not quite complete. "Well, you picked a good courthouse to study," Marcus said. "We run a tight ship here." "I can see that," Sarah replied. "Actually, I was wondering if you might have time to answer some questions about your procedures sometime. Off the record, of course. Just trying to understand how different courthouses handle things." Marcus found himself agreeing before he really thought about it. There was something appealing about Sarah Chun, her directness, maybe, or the way she seemed genuinely interested in his work. Most people saw courthouse security as a necessary inconvenience. She seemed to understand it was important. They arranged to meet for coffee the following Monday after Marcus's shift ended. The coffee shop Sarah suggested was a small place 3 blocks from the courthouse, the kind of neighborhood spot that served excellent coffee and minded its own business. Marcus arrived first and chose a table near the back. When Sarah walked in, she looked different somehow. Less formal than she had at the courthouse, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. She looked younger, more relaxed, but also more alert. "Thanks for taking the time," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "I know you must be tired after a full day." "Not at all. It's nice to talk shop with someone who's interested." Marcus had ordered black coffee. Sarah requested green tea. For the next hour, Sarah asked detailed questions about security protocols, staffing patterns, emergency procedures, and interagency coordination. Her questions were sophisticated, showing knowledge of federal security standards and courthouse operations that went well beyond what Marcus would have expected from an auditor. But it was the questions she didn't ask that caught his attention. Nothing about budgets or cost-effectiveness, which audit people usually cared about most. Nothing about compliance with specific regulations. Instead, she focused on operational details, how information flowed between different parts of the building, which personnel had access to what areas, how the courthouse coordinated with other federal agencies. "You know," Marcus said as they were finishing their drinks, "you ask very specific questions for an auditor." Sarah's green eyes met his steadily. "I believe in being thorough. Most auditors I've met are more interested in paperwork than operations." "I'm not most auditors." There was something in her tone that made Marcus lean back in his chair and really look at her. The casual clothes hadn't changed the way she held herself, straight-backed, alert, with an awareness of her surroundings that seemed almost automatic. "What kind of government work did you say you do, exactly?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, turning her teacup in small circles on the table. "The kind that requires very thorough background checks." Marcus felt something click into place. "You're not an auditor." "No," Sarah said simply. "I'm not. FBI." Something like that. Marcus sat back, processing this information. "And you're not really researching courthouse security procedures nationwide." "I'm researching this courthouse specifically. But I can't tell you why." The honesty was unexpected. Most federal agents Marcus had encountered were either completely closed-mouthed or tried to overwhelm you with their authority. Sarah was doing neither. "Can you tell me if there's any danger to the people I'm responsible for protecting?" Sarah considered this carefully. "Not immediate danger. But there is a situation that requires careful monitoring. And you need help with that monitoring. I need someone who knows this building, knows the people, knows what normal looks like, so they can spot what isn't normal." Marcus thought about his 8 years at the courthouse. The steady routine, the familiar faces, the quiet satisfaction of keeping people safe. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Nothing that would compromise your job or your safety. Just keep your eyes open for anything unusual. People who don't belong, patterns that seem off, questions that don't make sense. And if I see something, you call me." Immediately, Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. It looked official but minimal, just her name, a phone number, and a small federal seal. No agency name, no title, no address. "Can I think about it?" Marcus asked. "Of course. But Marcus." Sarah's voice became more serious. "If you decide to help, you can't tell anyone. Not your supervisor, not your wife, not your partner. No one. Marcus nodded slowly. How long do I have to decide? Take the weekend. Call me Monday morning either way. They walked back toward the courthouse parking garage together, talking about neutral topics, the weather, the coffee shop, Chicago traffic. But Marcus's mind was racing. In 8 years of courthouse security, nothing truly exciting had ever happened. The most dramatic incidents were usually medical emergencies or angry family members who had to be calmed down. Now a federal agent was asking for his help with something secret and potentially important. It was flattering, certainly, but also concerning. Marcus had a mortgage, a wife who worked part-time as a librarian, and 2 kids in college. He couldn't afford to lose his job or get involved in something dangerous. But as he drove home that evening, Marcus found himself thinking about Sarah's questions, her careful way of speaking, and the look in her eyes when she mentioned careful monitoring. Whatever was happening at his courthouse, it was significant enough to warrant federal attention. That weekend, Marcus found himself paying more attention to news reports, wondering if anything he heard might be connected to whatever Sarah was investigating. He looked at his courthouse differently during his Saturday morning stop to check on some maintenance issues, trying to see it through the eyes of someone planning something illegal. The building suddenly seemed full of potential vulnerabilities he had never considered. Service entrances that were monitored but not heavily secured. Delivery schedules that were predictable and regular. Staff routines that rarely varied. Computer systems that connected to networks throughout the federal system. By Sunday evening, Marcus had made his decision. Not because he was looking for excitement or wanted to play spy games, but because he realized that if something was wrong at his courthouse, he was one of the few people positioned to spot it early. And early warning might be the difference between a crisis and a tragedy. Monday morning, as he watched the familiar stream of attorneys, defendants, and families pass through his security checkpoint, Marcus noticed details he had previously overlooked. A delivery driver who seemed nervous. A reporter who asked too many questions about building layout. A maintenance worker he didn't recognize. Any of them could be completely innocent. Or one of them could be exactly what Sarah Chun was looking for. At 10:30 a.m., during his coffee break, Marcus dialed the number on Sarah's card. "I'm in," he said when she answered. "Good," Sarah replied. "Because I think something is going to happen soon."